What you are about to watch is based...
Hear me out. I have a long-standing interest in the paranormal. You know, things that probably ain't real, but many reckon they must be. Ghosts, cryptids, demons, normal gamers. Notice I don't include aliens in that because those are just real. You know? I just know that. But hang on, don't leave yet. I'm not crazy. I've just locked the doors. The windows are barred. You're not getting out. And maybe it would be more accurate to say that I'm a fan of paranormal content. I love the storytelling, the drama, and that little hint of, yeah, well, maybe. More so than I have any actual belief in any of these things. It's a paradoxical fascination of mine because, in reality, what a lot of these shows perpetuate is deeply unhealthy and barbaric. The amount of times I've had to watch some poor family deal with their mentally ill son or daughter by convincing them they are possessed by some demon they cherry-picked out of the Lesser Key of Solomon instead of getting them medicated. The amount of times I've heard someone describe in pitch-perfect detail the experiences of sleep paralysis as a real, tangible thing that happens in the waking world. It never gets old. It's so good. I have sat through 12 seasons of A Haunting, 5 seasons of Paranormal Witness. It gets blurry past that. Paranormal Survivor, My Haunted House, My Ghost Story, Evil Things, These Woods Are Haunted, I think was the last one I was watching, but that got kind of boring. Not to mention the dozens of ghost hunting shows. I could take all day listing my catalog of embarrassing content consumption, but all I need you to know is that I've watched so much of it, I've forgotten the names of these programs. I need you to know how tapped into this I am. If it's on the Travel Channel, or Destination America, or some offshoot of Discovery, I've probably seen it. I watch this shit to relax. Sometimes I'm barely watching it, it's just a talking head with atmospheric spooky music in the background while I do other things like... nothing. I got nothing going on. You dragged it out of me. So the thing that has been sitting with me for a year now is an hour-and-a-half-long documentary called Vampires in America. It aired on the Travel Channel sometime in 2022, but I think it was created in 2020. Maybe it sat on a shelf during COVID and is available on some streaming platforms like Discovery Plus. I don't know if they'll shut me down for showing any of it, seeing as though I didn't acquire it through proper channels. I couldn't even download it from Walmart. I had to get creative and make my own Walmart. So I guess we can just get right into why I was compelled to talk about it, and it's mainly because I don't fully understand what it is, what its goal is, what its intentions are. For now, you are my trusted friend, and I'm showing you a weird thing on a sensitive part of my body that I don't know what it is, and I'm scared what it is. So I just want you to tell me what it is. Everything around it is telling me it's a documentary, and I know this is the game we're all playing here. We're watching shit about the pursuit and science of imaginary things and calling it a documentary. But this thing that was put on television is either brilliant satire of the garbage that winds up on my favorite channels, or more bafflingly, it is an earnest attempt at grifting its audience into genuinely being enthralled by the possibility of vampires existing. I'll guide you along my thought process, my journey experiencing this amazing piece of content for the first time, and just to lock this down, keep in mind, this was aired with no hint of it being anything other than a documentary. No less illegitimate than anything else that would be aired on the Travel Channel. There was no preamble saying this is satire or fiction or an experiment centered around giving a psychotic the budget and means to produce a feature-length found footage film. Nope. It opens with a warning that there is disturbing content in it and that some names have been changed to protect the innocent. Far from the most bizarre thing about this, but within the first frame, I'm already raising an eyebrow. We then get a card that says between 2019 and 2020, missing persons cases in the southwestern United States increased by 30%. 2 men believe they know why.
The biggest secret of modern times is that vampires are real and they walk among us.
Okay, stop. Wait. So firstly, Amogus. But secondly, I guess on some level I knew what was going to happen, but it's different now that it's happening. In the fraction of the second I saw the premise of the show and hit play, a lot happened that could be summed up as my brain going, oh, I gotta see this. But now it's real, and that brings up so many more questions, and the questions I already had are being asked more emphatically. I'm screaming them at this point. I think I started screaming. I heard a loud noise for a long time, and then realized that I was the one making it. I woke up in a daze sometime later, only to see that it was still there, and that was comforting yet disconcerting as well. If we are to continue watching this, we have to accept that the premise behind it is that the same logic behind ghosts and cryptid content is going to be applied to vampires. A thing that I don't think it's ever been commonplace to be concerned about, even in the saddest circles of online pervertry. What faint exception I make for the possibility of the paranormal is immediately irrelevant, because I never considered this, but I do want to believe. If any of these things could be true, I do hope it is this one. So the intro is a montage of things that happen later, but it's so much to accept so quickly, and I want to scrutinize every frame of it, but there is too much, so I'll just have to get back to that when it comes up again later. After the title card, we meet our two vampire hunters, Eric Straight and Marcel von Tingen, and they are self-described as currently the only vampire hunters in the United States, which I gotta say, displays a considerable lack of self-reflection. You typed this out and didn't think like, wonder why that is. Eric claims that since 2001, he and Marcel have been vampire hunters and found evidence of vampires in all 50 states. He then outlines his first encounter with a vampire, which occurred in the year 1988. It was in Scotland, and he describes it as a stereotypical vampire like you would see in the movies, meaning a Dracula. He's burying the lead here. He didn't find a vampire. He found a Dracula. He tells this story over some personal footage of what I could easily buy as actually him in 1988. But he seems fine. He even does some sick parkour. Whoa! Anyway, he describes being mesmerized by this vampire until he saw its fangs, where he then ran off in terror. But ever since, he's been trying to find them again. And can I just say, I can't believe we're not even 3 minutes into this full feature film, and so much has happened already. I already feel a lot closer to you, so I'm going to work to sever that connection because this has given me a lot of anxiety, for being honest. Day 1 at the Phoenix, Arizona headquarters, we learn a bit more about Marcel.
I come from 25 generations of vampire hunters.
No. You can't just say that. You can't just be a human man and say those words. This is not in any way real, is it? Like, obviously, but there isn't even like a shred, a conspiracy behind it, alluding to a real thing of any kind. 25 generations of vampire hunters. Marcel just drops that like he's a fucking Belmont. And I'm supposed to accept this new reality. Okay. Proceed. So during this little part, they go over shit we already know about vampires from pop culture. They are perfect hunters, they can hide in plain sight, you never know who in your life might be a vampire. They stalk the night looking to suck folks' blood. This leads to the first taste of conspiracy, and it's a juicy one. So to Eric and Marcel, pop culture has been programming us to disregard vampires as myth, and this misinformation has been in many ways orchestrated by vampires themselves. This is what they want you to believe.
If no one believes in us, we can do what we want.
He even cites the example that many believe that Bram Stoker wrote Dracula based on the dictation of a real vampire, as to discredit real accounts of vampires. Hey, you know what would really throw humans off our trail? Ghostwriting a tell-all book describing in detail how vampires work and how they're gonna steal your wife and make you eat bugs or whatever. I don't remember what happened in the book. I could tell you all about the film. Maybe if Keanu Reeves was in the book creating a black hole of talent, I would remember it.
Music. Those animals.
4 minutes in, and I've got this new set of ideas swirling around in the old brain hole. And I'm thinking, so if every facet of this is bullshit, is this them genuinely attempting to use the language and logic of a conspiracy theory to legitimately get the old and mentally ill on their side? Are they recruiting vampire hunters? I don't know. Marcel adds that movies and TV shows often romanticize vampires as being capable of love and understanding, and that is not true. They are simply evil. Then there's some shots of the boys in their little bunker, and for a moment they cut to their red string conspiracy board, and I was feeling petty, so it passes by this blurred missing persons report that they printed out and pinned to the board, but I'm actually just realizing that even though they blurred the name, you can see it in this weird reflection effect they're doing, but I didn't even see that. I googled missing persons and the date and town listed on the paper and found that report. Like, it's identical. I can tell the pics are the same just by looking at them. So this is a real person, which is fucked up for a lot of reasons. One, a vampire didn't kill them, so there's no reason to drag the death of a real human into whatever it is you're doing here. Two, that same report details how this person died and that someone pleaded no contest for this crime. So I don't know, I think we can rule that one out. I don't honestly know how I will finish this video because every fucking second of it is jam-packed with insanity. Right after I got done cyber sleuthing, Eric explains that the media doesn't report vampire-related deaths, and the only reason the two of them can spot them is because of the training from the generations of vampire hunters before them.
History books do not cover vampires.
He then suddenly sprints into a history of vampires that begins in the year 68,000 BC. Vampires have pretty much always been there, evolving alongside man. They then migrated to Romania and established a home base, as he calls it. And he adds that Romania is still where you're likely to find the most vampires, but the appearance of vampire hunters has forced them to flee to other parts of the world. Marcel picks up this fan fiction they're writing and says that vampires first came to the US during the Civil War, and these two dinguses estimate that there are about 20,000 vampires currently in the US. The reasoning for this estimate? Don't worry about it. Why ask me that when any of this is happening? 6 minutes in now, and I'm still mouth agape trying desperately to understand what's on my dang old TV screen. I'll try to focus on the more upsetting notes of this, so after some more vampire facts you're likely to already know from pop culture osmosis, Eric pulls up a document on his PC that he claims is from the Registry of Missing Persons. He reiterates that missing persons reports have increased nationally in the last several years, and then pulls up an NPR article with a headline that says, "Not one drop of blood." Easy enough to look up. Let's take a gander. So this article is about cattle mutilation, but he introduces this as a missing persons case. He said, from Texas to California, there has been an increase in missing persons. Look at this.
This is gruesome.
And then they show that headline with the word cattle cut off. Deception aside, that's already a thing that is tied to another conspiracy. Like, it's literally probably just a cow dying of one of a million reasons that things die, and then animals and bugs eat them. The sun makes it explode and its blood absorbs into the earth. But beyond that, that is already part of alien mythology, and you can't just co-opt it into your even more outlandish ideas. So that's more of an aside, but the next thing they get into is one of the most troubling aspects of their entire reasoning for all of this. Eric says that the government and media refuses to examine this rise in missing persons as vampire attacks, and time again blames it on cartels. And he gives this real shitty look to Marcel, like, yeah, a likely story. And Marcel is quick to chime in. There's a high chance that the cartel are behind some of it.
But how could they be behind all of it?
Like, that's a factual thing. We've seen them, talked to them, and there's overall just, a lot more evidence that they at the very least exist and have done some murders. So, I don't know, it's kind of an Occam's razor situation. It's like, if you got all these dead bodies showing up, it's probably cartel, then wildlife, then, the elements. If you want to then add vampires after that as a possibility, then that is your prerogative, I suppose. But I don't know, it just sounds kind of really dumb and stupid. I don't know how angry I should be with you, because I don't understand how seriously you're taking this.
This kind of violence that's being blamed on the cartels fits more perfectly with the vampires' MO.
Just out of morbid curiosity and the desire to be bummed out, I looked up these other two reports, and I mean, one, you can guess what happened to them, both by the details given, and I'm firmly in the normal, very tragic murder camp. So it looks like they're going to be taking this missing persons data and focusing their search for vampires in the deserts between Texas and California, and the cattle mutilation concept proves not to have been an isolated oopsie, but a legitimate portent of the presence of vampires. They show a bunch of pins on a map that I guess are all cattle mutilations, and there seems to be a lot at a ranch in Patagonia, Arizona.
All the same ranch.
Over 2 months.
Now, buckle up, because your feelings about our new buddies might shift suddenly. Day 3, we didn't leave right away, we slept on it a bit, but we're on the way, and over a montage of them driving, Marcel explains that vampires can drink animal blood, though it is not as nutritious. And he drops some deeply disturbing personal lore. He claims he started hunting vampires with his father when he was 14. And I'm thinking, did any of these generations of vampire hunters actually kill any of these vampires?
I was there when my father killed a vampire in Hungary.
Your father is a murderer. Your father killed an innocent man in cold blood. I'm guessing he lied and made up that it was a vampire to shield you from the trauma of witnessing your father stake a man in the heart.
It was the most horrific and terrifying episode in my life.
Oh, I bet! I bet seeing that fucked you up good, brother. He guesses there are about 400 to 500 vampire hunters throughout the world, and yet here, in one of the biggest, dumbest countries, we only have these two geniuses. So at the ranch, we get their first interview segment, and this was another step down the spiral into madness.
You Jacob?
Two things are made clear immediately. One, this man is an actor. He's not particularly great, but he clearly knows some form of acting. He is acting for a film when this is meant to be a documentary, I think.
Oh yeah. Call the sheriff, they come down. And nothing's ever come of it.
Which makes it abundantly clear that these two are not actors. They may be acting right now, but acting is not their forte. This is a new thing they are having to do to complete this project. Or they are the best actors on the face of the earth. To sum up, they ask this guy about his dead animals, and he just confirms everything they want to hear. It sounds like a classic example of what they would call a cattle mutilation, almost as if he were coached.
Creepy thing is, all these attacks seem to happen at night.
That's not that creepy. I mean, I imagine night would be when most things that would attempt to eat a cow would attempt to eat a cow. Earlier they ask if he gets coyotes around here, and he says nah. And I'm just gonna call bullshit on that. Coyotes are everywhere on this side of the country, and they subsist in any condition. I live in a city. I've seen coyotes thrive in a trolley station parking lot. You're out in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, on a ranch with animals. Trust me, they are there. I bet you'd hear them at night because they sound like a choir of demon babies.
Listening to Jacob, I have no doubt that we're dealing with vampires.
Immediately, Eric goes into another alt history lesson about Vlad the Impaler. In 1428, he assembled all the vampires in Romania, and together they destroyed the Ottoman Empire. This amassed vampire army was responsible for the deaths of over 20,000 people, and he brings up this story as an example of the dangers of vampires gathering in large numbers, something that must be happening because of the increased frequency of cattle mutilations. This just gives you a glimpse into how Eric's mind works. He's already made up his mind that the cattle deaths are the result of vampires, a thing he acknowledges only one other person in the country believes in truly, and that this is a sign of a potential vampire army uprising. This is what he's living with every day, just keep that in mind. Jacob leaves them with another lead, a veterinarian that is as invested in figuring out what's happening to these animals as he is. Marcel finally addresses what I've been screaming at the TV this whole time, the fact that cattle mutilation is typically something attributed to alien abductions and UFOs. But he knows it's vampires because why else would the blood always be gone? He finishes off this 1-2 punch by adding,
The only reason why vampires remove the organs is to throw people off.
okay, dude, okay. You're asking a lot of me, and I'd say you're even asking a lot of America's dying grandparents. You expect me to believe that vampires are real and that they are covering their tracks by making it look like aliens killed these cows? Man, tell me more. So they call ahead to this vet who is willing to share his findings on these animal deaths, and they show up there 3 hours later. I'm hoping this vet, like, come on, he's a man of science. He's got to shoot our boys down a little bit, keep them guessing. Ain't no goddamn way they're gonna walk in there and immediately have their theory confirmed.
All these animals died as a result of the blood being drained from 2 punctures.
Fuck off. Fuck off. Look at him, nodding like he saw this coming. Like this was destined to be the day. Alright, so in the zigzagging graph of my understanding of what I am witnessing, I've been ping-ponging back and forth between legitimate grift, poorly executed hoax, and genuinely funny satire. And something is about to happen that will make it shoot back into the latter's category. Eric starts talking about how vampires do their thing. Of course, they bite your neck where your artery is.
I wear a bandana made out of Kevlar.
No! This is a joke. These are comedians. It's too good. It's too fucking perfect. He's wearing a bulletproof bandana around his neck to protect him from vampire fangs, even though he also admits that.
But they're also known to bite along the other major arteries in the arms and legs.
This next bit of Vampire the Masquerade OC he adds is pretty interesting. He claims that often when a vampire makes a kill, they will leave behind messages for other vampires, such as sprinkling soil from their native country.
Other times we found a hand-drawn mark of the V.
You want to guess what the V stands for? It's okay, go ahead, take a shot. No! So they come back from their first day out, and honestly, it doesn't sound like they've learned anything they didn't already know. But Marcel wants to find out if there are any human deaths in the area that fit the same MO, which there are going to be. Like, just mathematically, that has to have happened in such a large stretch of land. At the 20-minute mark, there's been no sign of the lore slowing down. Eric explains what VNet is.
One of the tools we use extensively is VNet.
He describes it as an advanced software that gathers law enforcement records, declassified military files, periodicals, and the dark web, analyzes it all, and recognizes patterns within it. So now they don't have to bother lying about real articles and disappearances. They can just say they are using this magic software they made up to generate conspiracy theories for them. Very, very cool. So he looks up the search parameters for deaths within 400 miles in which the victim had their blood and organs removed.
This is bad.
Oh, but they still just show a Googled article. And I looked this one up, and there is actually a follow-up article that disproves that headline. This was the result of misinformation spread on Facebook. The guy this article is written about was found dead, completely intact, but after they did the autopsy, they later did a second autopsy, which on paper sounds weird, because they took all his shit out, and somehow that info leaked, and people's imaginations ran wild.
Puncture wounds.
But for that part, they just lied. Like, that was not part of that case. Very strange how they are bothering to dredge up these real-life and recent cases and then also lie about them, as though you might look into it, but only far enough to see that the headline does exist somewhere on the internet in some form. The next two articles he pulls up, I couldn't find exact matches, because the first one, the headline was so vague, and the second one, he doesn't even show. But they both give a lot of detail about the murder that I don't think would typically be printed in like a news blurb about someone who died weeks ago, you know?
Puncture wounds to the neck and upper abdomen.
And either way, injuries to the neck, like, don't have to mean vampire. That's literally just a good place to hurt someone if you're trying to kill them. It's an important part of the body. It's not just a load-bearing pillar for your noggin.
It's possible the vampires are still close by, close by, close by.
Day 5. We took another day off, but we're back on the road. One of those articles mentions a private investigator named Tim that is continuing to look into one of these mysterious deaths, which I also think they wouldn't include in an article, like the name of a private investigator, but that's just me. Tim leads them to where the body was found, which is now adorned with a cross thanks to the victim's family. He thinks the murder also happened in this same spot because there were signs of a struggle in the dirt. Marcel points to a spot with slightly different colored soil and suggests that could be a vampire marker. It's just survived weeks of the elements and hikers and dirt bikers and animals trotting all over and pissing on it, but that's fine. Then my man does some absolutely deranged shit. He collects some of this soil and puts it in a little container, explaining that vampire soil, as in soil from Eastern European countries, has a high ammonia content. So he carries with him an ammonia testing kit, which he uses on the dirt, not perturbed by the fact that there is also another substance that your little test could be picking up on.
It's positive.
Positively full of piss. I must get this piss back to the lab. Tim tells them about the injuries the body sustained, lacerations to the face and neck that were done while the victim was still alive, making the chances of it being an animal unlikely in his opinion.
One of the leg bones, there were teeth marks on the bone.
Stop giving him that knowing glance. Vampires don't chew people's legs off. There's no lore that says that. Marcel gives us the rundown of one of his previous hunts in Hungary in the 1970s, when he was presumably, 10? He describes a woman who was killed by a vampire and both her legs were stripped of flesh with bite marks left on the bone to make it look like an animal attack.
But with all the blood gone and clear fang marks, we knew it was a vampire.
But guys, I just think this is a dangerous line of thinking. This is in large part why things are as fucked as they are. It's like that media paranoia of calling everything fake news, but so many layers deep, you're thinking that not only is the news fake, it's secretly all about vampires. Strictly vampires. It just so happens that before the body was buried, the police made casts of the chewed bones, and Tim has copies of those casts in his office, which involves a lot of things I can't imagine happen, but I'm playing along. I've invested almost a half hour of my time, let's party. Presumably because they just didn't want a dull moment in the documentary, Marcel talks about the myth that being bitten by a vampire will turn you into one. This is apparently highly unlikely, but what he has heard of is people willingly giving their blood to vampires as a fetish, because they get off on it.
There are people who get off on willingly providing their blood to a vampire.
I don't know if they meant for this to come off as chilling or something, but it sounds like two consenting adults having a good time, and honestly, none of your business, Marcel. At Tim's office, he busts out the bones and the boys take a look at them, and indeed there are a few gnaw marks on them. Tim says he's already inspected them, but they weren't able to determine what animal caused them, allowing Eric to drop a line so sick I bet he came right then and there.
Well, we don't know the exact animal. How do you know it was an animal?
Together they measure the bite spacing between what are presumably two canine puncture marks. While Tim is surprised to find that the spacing is the same as the average human jawbone, Eric proclaims with an immeasurable amount of unearned confidence,
I know who killed this guy.
But it's just, you're saying that because you think a vampire killed the guy, but you don't know who this man is. The guy, the vampire, you don't know him. All you have right now is the idea that a vampire killed this person. That doesn't mean as much as you think it means. Wow. Imagine being a guy that says that about a cold case. It's what happens next that once again moves the dial for me on what vampires in America is, and it slides back towards grift and failed hoax. Eric is now so sure that they are dealing with a vampire that he's willing to come out to Tim.
Okay. It was a vampire.
And he does not take it so well. So to assure Tim that they're not fucking around, Eric produces from his bag the dental cast of a 19th century vampire destroyed in Romania, which is something that is apparently really hard to come by, and the only reason he has it is because it was passed down to him by his mentor. In the first genuine attempt at making this seem real, Tim is getting upset that they are not taking this seriously, and Eric addresses the camera crew and asks them to give them a minute to convince him to continue the interview, which they do, but continue to record the audio from his hot mic. He doesn't want to continue being in the movie because he thinks he will lose credibility as a private detective. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. Once again, the guys are given a new lead, and this time it concerns a possible vampire attack survivor named Aaron. He didn't leave them with like a phone number or address though, so they just sit in their car, Google the name, and start calling people, and I gotta admit, at this point in the film, I'm almost empathizing with them. There is something so utterly pathetic about this moment, that it's almost humanizing, I think. I think I want them to find vampires, man. Come on. They've wasted their whole lives on this pursuit. Let them have it. Let them live in this Shutter Island-enabled delusion. Eventually, they wind up getting a hold of Aaron's mother. She hasn't heard from him since his attack, and the last time she met him, he got, quote, extremely violent. She doesn't know who these two guys are still, but gives them his last known address in Tucson. Already, they are theorizing that Aaron could very well be a vampire himself, so they are willingly walking into this situation alone. They take their time, creeping up to Aaron's place, and knock on the door. He answers. Marcel says they want to talk about his attack, and he lunges at the cameraman, causing a scuffle. He's a jittery, nervous guy, and eventually agrees to talk about the attack when he can tell that they are on his side.
We should talk inside.
This shot is like, I know it's dramatic and whatnot, but it's not how you should produce a documentary. Ordinarily, you want to see both subjects in an interview. That's just a thought. Eric and Marcel quickly get the reveal out of the way and start out by saying they are vampire hunters, which doesn't seem to bother Aaron all that much.
Seriously, man. This is what we do.
He goes into the story of his attack. While he was homeless, he crashed with two characters named Ben and Caleb. They offered him a room to stay in for free, but eventually explained that what they did want in return was some of his blood. Feeling indebted to them, he agreed to cut himself for them under the belief that it was some kind of experiment. But when he saw them drinking it, he refused to provide any more, which sent them into a rage. They attempted to kill him, but he managed to run away and call the police from his neighbor's place.
And Ben and Caleb were gonna bottle my blood to drink it later. They were either gonna bleed me dry over a long period of time.
If I could just interrupt here to update you on where I'm at in the story, I'm now in a place where I feel as though we've just detached from reality. We've detached from the pretense of this being a documentary for such an extended period of time that this now feels like an attempt at some kind of indie horror film made under the guise of disposable Travel Channel content, which, as an idea, is almost brilliant. If this just slowly broke format and we actually just watched these two get into a bloody altercation with vampires, holy shit. A free idea. The cops never found Ben and Caleb, but Aaron is able to tell them where he originally met them, at a truck yard on the edge of town that's become a homeless encampment. This is where shit feels like it might actually do what I suggested. The boys roll up to this place at night with the understanding that this might be a vampire lair, and the boys start getting loaded up, opening up this antique leather vampire hunting kit from Etsy.
The most effective way to destroy a vampire is to cut off its head.
Yo, let's fucking go. Alright, boys. I gotta tell you, I had my doubts, and I continue to have them, but I'm so ready to see you go to prison for murder right now. Marcel explains that he carries a machete with him everywhere he goes because it's what his father used to destroy vampires.
It's what he used throughout his work, and it was effective every time.
Buddy, I think your father was like a notorious serial killer. There's probably a lot of people waiting to hear this story.
Nothing.
No.
If we're writing a fake vampire story here, it's actually genuinely clever of him to walk around spraying luminol around a potential vampire lair. That idea should be used in a better film or video game. After a while, it's clear that nobody is using the space as a homeless encampment anymore. There are signs of one, but the place is a ghost town. Marcel finds what he thinks might be a coffin, but Eric shoots that down and says it's just a box, which just made me think like he really thought that they'd be that lucky. Look, Eric, I found a Dracula's medallion here. Good find, Marcel. The luminol finally reveals a bloody handprint, and as they are just staring at it, a man appears dramatically behind them. So this is like a movie now, right? In what world would the cameraman just obey the rules of documentary and not say, fellas, I think you're gonna want to see this. Oh, now he chimes in. See, Marcel is running after this guy, armed with a weapon. He's holding it in a manner that's primed and ready to unsheath. Does he really intend to behead the next person he sees? I mean, once the police get involved, you've got a decent case if you, like, shot him or something. I feel like it would be hard to explain a self-defense beheading. It doesn't strike me as something you could accomplish by one overzealous swing. So the boys chase this guy around the trailers back and forth to an almost comedic timing. See, shots like this you have to set up for. You can't both have the crew talk to you, breaking the fourth wall, and then have these static framed up shots of the vampire. That's not how this works. This isn't what we do in the shadows. Is it? Unfortunately, the vampire proves to be too agile for them, and if you can believe it, our boys just didn't have it in them to adequately give chase. However, Eric makes the astute observation that since they found all that blood, there was most certainly a crime committed here. Someone was actually either killed or mortally wounded by the looks of it, so they just leave and never come back and never talk about it again. Instead, Eric tells us about vampire elders. Elders are anywhere from 500 to 5,000 years old, and each continent has at least one. He guesses, based on nothing, that there are two in the US. If the vampires are planning an attack on mankind, it's most certainly being orchestrated by a cabal of elder vampires, which is getting perilously close to existing schizo theories about psychic vampire child trafficking rings and reptilians. It's the global elites, vampire Illuminati, George Soros is a Nosferatu. In what I would call a desperate play, they see a convenience store across the street and stop in to see if someone there has seen a vampire. An employee outside talks with them about the lot, and how it used to be a homeless encampment until a month ago when people started going missing. The cops were coming down to investigate every other week, which I don't believe, but they never found anyone. Eric changes his theory about the truck yard being a lair, and now thinks it was simply a vampire feeding ground. This is one of many times that he has hammered in the fact that they may be dealing with
A lot more vampires than we originally thought.
He has said this multiple times throughout the 54 minutes so far, but I've just been leaping over it because it's very repetitive. But it makes me wonder if this was some subliminal means of extending this into a series. Like maybe they filmed this as a pilot and they only got the green light for a single film, so they smashed 3 or 4 episodes into one thing. Either way, repeatedly telling old people that on top of all the other fake things they are told they have to be afraid of, I feel like it's overkill to throw in vampires as well. Day 6, 4:30 p.m., getting a lazy start today. Back at headquarters, the boys figure that the vampire lair can't be too far from their feeding ground. They rattle off some clues as to how you can spot these like soil from their native country if you can recognize one kind of soil from another, the red V symbol and coffins. It's strange that they're intimate knowledge of these secret vampire societies is not too far from what pop culture has been telling us. Turns out we've mostly been getting it right this whole time. Marcel uses VNet to zero in on where the lair could be. As you can see, he searches locations: underground, abandoned. He gets a hit, an old mine 4 miles from the feeding ground.
This is the feeding ground.
Oh shit, that's close enough, I can probably look that up. San Xavier Indian Reservation. Let's just enhance that, what he's pointing at there. And we get the Casino del Sol Resort and Hotel. Now, they could have just built that in the last year, but...
The mine is here.
So impressively, this is a mine, but it is not abandoned. In fact, there's even a school and laboratory there for people that want to get into the mining industry. It's an extension of the University of Arizona. So I hope they've taken this into account before they show up armed to the teeth. On the way to the mine, they call the chem lab that they submitted the sample of piss dirt to, and the first thing out of this doctor's mouth is, guys, great news, it's not piss. They dropped the name and occupation of this guy from the chem lab, so I looked it up, and unsurprisingly, I couldn't find any trace of a Suda Research Institute. But looking up Dr. John Pashna at Suda Research Institute yielded one non-garbage result: a link to a site called India Today and an article with the headline, "Vampires are real. Many of them live in New Orleans," which I initially only found interesting because there is no mention of this guy's name anywhere in the article, yet it somehow led back to the topic of vampires being real. Unlike Vampires in America, this article is not pushing the same agenda. It's actually about the New Orleans Vampire Association, or NOVA, which, depending on how long you've been on the internet, you might describe as a denomination of otherkin. Folks what call themselves vampires and behave as such, so yeah, what am I gonna say? You're not a vampire? You put in the work, put in the hours. And drank what's ours? Blood. I've forgotten about the film and I'm doing this now. In reading the promotional material for Nova, I realized just how beautifully dorky this all is. Like, they have houses and credos that border on copyright infringement. They claim to represent the entire continuum of our community, ranging from those who view the vampiric state as a matter of energy, those for whom it is a matter of biology, spirituality, racial identity, or biospirituality. You can tell that this was not the first time they attempted to form some kind of official organization here. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that a collective of high-level goths would have inflated egos. In an effort to end the pretentious power plays that have plagued past attempts to build such a body, they developed a council where each vampire house has a seat at a round table, presumably to decide which Danny's bathroom they should meet up in. House Rakotsi is the founding house, headed by Mephistopheles, of course. And they have their own website that looks like this, and all I can think is, this must be so much fun. What am I doing with my life? I could be doing whatever's going on here. It does seem like there's a lot of reading involved, a lot of lore and precepts to memorize, which does behave a bit like a prohibitive barrier for me, so I'm kind of out. On my way out, expecting to see what kind of mugs or t-shirts they sell for their little gang, I was surprised to instead find that you can pay for the services of a necromancer, who will, for $100 an hour, contact a dead relative or friend for you, as well as a variety of other spells and rituals. However, he does make it clear in all caps at the bottom, does not attempt to raise the dead to full life, will not create zombies of any kind. I feel bad for the guy that read all the previous stuff and was thinking, this guy's the real deal. Huh? Oh, ain't that a steel bucket of piss. God damn, if you want an exorcism, it's gonna be $150 for the consultation, $1,000 retainer, and then $400 a day after that. I guess it's probably less than it would cost to just become medicated. So look, before I read this last part, what I was going to say is that this is a realm of vampires are real that is mostly okay. I mean, I feel like extending that to scamming people with exorcisms and whatnot is crossing a line. And this weird organization of power they've implemented has likely led to troublesome scenarios, I can only imagine. But on a base level, calling yourself a vampire, dressing in pseudo-Victorian era attire, and consensually imbibing each other's fluids, that is acceptable and the only circumstance where you could, though superficially, say vampires are amogus. And I'd like to make it absolutely, abundantly clear, I am a fan of vampire media. It's one of few realms of content that I don't even care if it's bad. Beyond that, I won't see if it's bad. If there is a person with pointy fangs in it, it's a cheat. It's a hack. I will not see reason in assigning it a score. I was just watching the Lifetime film Mother May I Sleep With Danger, which is sitting at a 4 out of 10 on IMDb. And yet, I don't remember the last time I was this emotionally invested in a film. Some would call rewriting a 90s made-for-TV film into an attempt at a heartfelt lesbian vampire love story a strange move, but those two deserve to have each other, and to have their love flourish, unimpeded by conservative parents or rival gangs of vampires. It doesn't matter that whoever wrote this has never met a lesbian in their life and thinks all they do is take pictures of each other's boobs. Yes, of course, that's an important pillar of the relationship. But it's not everything. They do more stuff than that. Oh, where was I? Oh yeah, the guy from the chem lab says it's not piss dirt. It's a type of soil called Chernozem.
One country in particular, soil is about 1/5 Chernozem.
Don't say Romania, don't say Romania. God! Damn! They show up to the mine at nightfall, which I feel is a rookie mistake. Why would you show up during their time to operate? Have you not watched Supernatural? You show up during the day while they're sleeping, then you sneak in with your weapon dipped in dead man's blood. I know more about this than you, I think.
We've gone into places like this before, and we've encountered vampires inside.
Well, okay, but you've never killed any vampires, so what's the story there? You keep saying you've encountered vampires all the time. What happens every time? They just compel you like in Vampire Diaries? You didn't find anything here, just an empty cave full of rocks. Also, it would be really cool if you wore a scarf that was hard and I couldn't bite through it. This whole thing seems pointlessly dangerous. You're just wandering into a twisty, windy mine by yourselves with machete out. What if you get lost? What if there are too many vampires? Oh right, if they found vampires and filmed them, the world would probably be a very different place. And vampires in America would be the new Bible. They find more Romanian soil in the shape of a coffin, suggesting at one point a vampire coffin was there. Guy learned about Chernozem 20 minutes ago, and all of a sudden he's got a nose for loam? F*** off. Offering the first genuine change to vampire lore, Marcel explains that vampires can hibernate for hundreds of years, but they are not immortal. Hibernation only slows down the process of aging, meaning they are, contrary to popular belief, not immortal, which severely impacts how fucking sick vampires are, I gotta be honest. A few steps further, Eric finds a bunch of used candles.
Vampires use candles as a light source.
A little further, they find 2 backpacks. Inside, they find a high school calculus book, as well as some makeup, which seems to imply a teenage victim. But they don't seem to know that this mine is in part used by a school. I don't think this is canon in their world, though. Eric lets us know that obviously this isn't enough to go to the cops with, which surprised me because I didn't know it was in their plans to alert the cops to anything they're doing. They didn't report that bloody handprint earlier. It's just everything about what you're doing is such a bad look. You're not looking for Bigfoot in a massive forest that also has bears and shit. You're just trolling around Tucson, breaking and entering with medieval weaponry, and I like it. Back at HQ the next day, oh, big mistake showing a real business that your HQ is supposed to be next to. World Nails and Spa, all the way down in sunny Los Angeles. Meaning their HQ has to be set up inside either a salon or a payday loan building. The perfect cover. Eric says some more shit that sets him only a hair's breadth away from being on InfoWars. He's very concerned that the vampires may be targeting the young because young blood is the most powerful and revitalizing blood there is, likening its effects to vampire steroids. He goes into a case he was working in Mexico in the 90s, where a vampire that fed on a teenager was able to escape custody by bending the steel bars of his jail cell. Marcel hops back on VNet to look for homicides under the age of 25 in a 10-mile radius around the mine, and finds 5 kids that have disappeared around the warehouse district. He pulls up an article about one of these deaths, an 18-year-old girl found drained of blood. Of course I looked up this article, which is real, but it was a crime perpetrated by the victim's boyfriend, who is in prison, and it was not in Tucson, but West Hollywood. You can even see that it says that in the thing he's reading.
Very close to downtown.
No, I don't think West Hollywood is close to downtown Tucson. They used VNet to contact the owner of the warehouse where this crime supposedly happened, and they head over there the next night. While they wait for this guy to show up, there's this quick establishing shot of a missing persons flyer taped to a telephone pole, which I can only hope is not real. Like, just please don't rope any more real dead people into whatever it is y'all are doing right now. The owner doesn't show up on time, so they take it upon themselves to take a little peek inside the warehouse without his supervision. They scour all of the graffiti looking for anything spooky, and in a bathroom stall, find some blood and that red V. Suddenly, the lights as well as some arcade machines turn on, so they go stare at them, wondering what act of vampire devilry was done to accomplish this, when the owner finally appears behind them. But this is played as a commercial break jump scare. Tony talks to the boys about the murder that took place at his warehouse. He mentions that the victim was a regular at some of the raves that are thrown down here in the warehouse district. He says he rented it out for the same purpose a few times, but sometimes the people organizing it can be a little shady on account of there usually being a kid that goes missing at these raves. He seems to be dealing just fine with this arrangement, however. Marcel tells us that he's seen the same thing before while hunting for vampires at German discos. It's just so funny that they both have all these stories of past jobs, past hunts, yet none of them have ever killed a vampire. How do you just keep going on like that without making a dent in your crusade?
Because the vampire smell lingers for a long time. Vampires are incapable of love. They're total evil. They pretend to be loving, they pretend to be understanding.
My man fell in love with some goth that broke his fucking heart. Then he just became a vampire hunter. In all the vampires' faces, I see Hans. I made him gay. I don't know why particularly. Well, yes I do. Tony tells them that the promoter for these raves is a guy named Sergey. There's a horror sting that implies we should know who that is, but we don't.
His name is Sergey Molovich.
Who? Sergey is pretty much unreachable. He only contacts Tony via private numbers. So they go out to the car and bust out the laptop to cyberstalk this guy.
Let's see if we can find anything on this guy. Not getting anything.
What? But why is this guy so adept at arranging these clandestine raves and remaining anonymous, yet he gave Tony his full government name? Very weird. The only record matching that name belonged to a guy who died in northern Arizona in the 1920s. He also finds a guy with a very similar name who owns a bunch of storage facilities in town. So many that they form a ring around Tucson, but it's not just here.
This guy has facilities in every major US city.
I feel like this is a big deal. Your reaction suggests that this is hugely significant, and yet I feel nothing. Somehow you need to bring closure to this adventure within 10 minutes. The nearest of these storage facilities is 4 miles from them, so they head over there in hopes of learning something about Sergey and the vampires responsible for the death of this girl in West Hollywood. The facility is closed, so the boys skulk around it looking for clues until they manage to find one unit with its door left unlocked. Opening it, they find an empty coffin with sprinkles of Chernozem and a jar that clearly once held blood. Why don't they just get a fucking mattress? You know what I mean? I guess I don't get why a creature that has lived several lifetimes and consumed several lifetimes worth of knowledge still chooses to live like a goblin. Well, I'm one to talk. Deciding to check the other units, they start opening doors and realizing that all of them are the same. It's a storage space for hibernating vampires. In one of them, they find the mark of the vampire with a line through it, implying that vampires were once here, but their hideout has been compromised. The circled V with a line through it also looks a lot like another established symbol. I don't have anything to add to that observation other than I think the vampires could use a graphic design team. They look into a few more, ready to cut the head off of anything inside, but give up, realizing that all the units are unlocked and likely empty. They were too late, but the idea that there are hundreds of these facilities all over the country housing untold numbers of vampires, enough for an army, deeply troubles our heroes. Eric revises his estimation of the vampire population in the US from 20,000 to 500,000 vampires plotting to take over. And if your grandparents aren't already reaching for their guns, barring the doors and windows, Eric leaves our tale with one final sentiment.
It's entirely possible that your next door neighbors are vampires. The threat is real, and we all have to be on high alert.
And that's it. That's the last we've heard from Eric and Marcel and this apparently really alarming amount of vampires. By the time the credits are rolling and you're getting suggested Amish haunting, which incidentally I did watch and it was not good but far from the worst ghost-related media I've consumed, I have long since burned through the content I would describe as traditionally entertaining, and now I just crave the atmosphere, the presence of a paranormal show. It's me rubbing ghosts into my gums. Anyway, by now you might be where I was, thinking surely either this is an elaborate tax write-off, or the intention of this film was to be transparently fiction. This was a bad horror movie masquerading as a documentary, a horror mockumentary of sorts. But I can't find anywhere on Discovery Plus that says it's fiction. Its category has keywords like unexplained and paranormal, but if you go to something that is a proper movie with a script, it says scripted. So what's the difference? I have to imagine that in order for this to be what it is, there needed to be some degree of scripting. Regardless of whether or not they were hiring actors, they were hiring people to have roles, they gave them lines that perfectly confirm every idea they have. Maybe they got permits to film places they then claimed were other places. There is theater happening here. A lot of shows like this, particularly ones about ghosts, are absolutely not depicting reality, but many of them want to be taken seriously in some regard, at least within their community. And look, as someone who watches a lot of these paranormal shows that dub themselves reality shows, for the most part, they follow an honor system of sorts, with how they stretch the truth. There's a reason that shows where paranormal investigators visit spooky places are both silly and boring, and it's because they can really only fake personal experience.
Now, did you hear?
Yeah, I also saw a shadow walk.
I heard like a...
If they say they feel a temperature drop, we just gotta take their word for it. Same goes for spirit boxes and EVP. Well, I've seen them fake that pretty hard actually, but most of the time it's just like a garbled mess of sound and they're like, oh, he said...
Talk to me. Talk to me.
Talk to me. Okay.
This is, however, why if you're watching a show with a talking head and reenactment, they can go nuts with embellishment. You weren't there, you don't know. Maybe I was possessed by a demon and it wasn't just sleep paralysis. You've only got my word to go off of. I say I saw a ghost, you film a ghost there. Vampires in America is selling itself as the former and not the latter, which means it's breaking the unspoken code of all this ghosts and goblins bullshit. Even its IMDb page lists it as a documentary, and the guy that played the private investigator was nice enough to add that credit to his resume. Wait, what the fuck? He was in Bible Man?
All I know is I've been praying and praying, and nothing has changed. And then today, it all became clear. It feels like God doesn't even care.
Yes! Doubt's out.
The user reviews for this are an entertaining mix of people either upset about it being fake or playing along with its absurdity by calling out the bad reviewers as perpetuating the vampire conspiracy. Meh. I wish Discovery still had enough respect for their viewers to place a title card at the beginning that states these shows as being for entertainment purposes only. Some people literally think this is real and these shows are getting out of hand. Still though, mildly fun. More like bullshit in America. Turned it off as soon as the rancher gave his interview. Obviously an actor. Discovery Plus rolled right into this thing after another program. Now this garbage is stuck in my continue watching queue. Come on, Discovery, stop faking it. There's plenty of credible teams trying to do real work in fringe science and the paranormal. Get some of them already. Very good and informative. All bad reviews are deep state vampires. I have been telling my friends, I've been into vampires since I read Twilight at the school library, that vampires are actually real. There is so much evidence in history to suggest that they are obviously more than just mere stories. People take this stuff very seriously, and we are so quick to write it off as superstition. I hope this show goes far. Oh my god, so slay. Me and my mom love this show. I am a vampire, so it's good to see my people getting representation that isn't Twilight. Twilight sucks. My mom isn't a vampire, but I turned when I was 16. I'm 329 now. And she's been so helpful with me turning into a vampire. She gives me a pound of blood every night, so I don't have to hunt and kill people. Great show. You may have had the thought, well, who are these guys? Eric and Marcel, are they merely actors or do they genuinely go about their day side-eyeing everyone in the grocery store, hand trembling on the handle of a serrated knife? And I couldn't dig up much, just more things that cast further levels of annoyance on my simple request to understand why this is on my internet. There's a Slash film interview with Eric that I want to say reads as fake. Reads as an ad, a ploy to get you to watch Vampires in America by casting doubt on how much he actually believes in vampires. He's really straddling the line between, haha, this is all in good fun, and No, yeah, I think all of this is real. When asked about the production, he says, "We're just seeking to find answers to long-standing questions that I've always had. We're kind of exploring the space between myth and reality. We've got some compelling stories and a possibility, and we're investigating that vampires may live among us today." So firstly, among us. But that word may is really surprising considering the content of the show. Not only does TV Eric claim that it is a certainty that vampires are real, he and his buddy walk around armed for the eventuality. I don't know exactly how this interview was conducted, if it was over the phone, Skype, or just emailed questions, but he does appear to be very in tune with vampire pop culture. He's a fan, and he even repeats some of the anecdotes from the show, like meeting a Dracula in Scotland. Perhaps the most revealing answer comes when the interviewer asks pretty pointedly what he thinks about ghost hunting shows, and things peripheral to his own, if they are real at all. He responds, "Stories covered are based on true life events. Are they actors? Are they real people? I would rather leave that for your own judgment. I want people to take this show how they want to take it. I hope that they're inspired to explore the possibility that vampires exist." Later adding, "If you believe it, come along on that journey and help us explore. If you just think that we're two crazy guys that are wasting our time and are absolute madmen, I'm fine with that too." And at this point in my investigation, I'm beginning to feel silly, as though I've overthought all of this. That the truth is, all this isn't that deep or worthy of dissecting. If anything, I've been sucked into the likely boardroom orchestrated vortex of awareness through anger, platforming via outrage. I feel used, made an instrument of that most dubious of networks, travel. Because who of the modern age, of sound mind and thinking brain, would hear the premise for this show and not think, "Oh, dumb, stupid joke"? The Travel Channel's tweet announcing the show and its trailer is still up, and all of its responses are just as incredulous as I've felt throughout our time together. There's even someone else who created a thread calling out Eric and Marcel and the Travel Channel, finding a few of the same falsities that I did. I guess what keeps me intrigued is the delicate game of advertising these shows and networks have to play. It's like there's no way to tell when you get it wrong, but when you get it wrong, people notice. There's a post on the Travel Channel's own page that describes the show as much more lighthearted than its content, simply saying that two guys think there might be evidence that vampires exist. What do you think? Come along for the ride and make up your own mind. But nothing in the show is phrased as a possibility. It's a certainty. This is what's happening. Wake up, America. Like just the other day, I watched a show called Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, and there are a lot of Bigfoot shows, but the majority of them are, harmless LARPing, following the trails of bears and other woodland creatures, looking at grainy trail cams that depict some blurry shape and exclaiming, "Yep, he's close." The difference in Alaskan Killer Bigfoot is that it then makes the claim that Bigfoot is not a flesh and blood monkey man, but a demonic spirit. A demonic spirit that they then purge from the forest by blasting it with a modified leaf blower turned holy incense thrower. If we ignore the reality of what this conclusion is, an admittance of defeat, the only thing left to do after an entire season of walking around a forest, pointing at trees, and getting spooked by leaves rustling, it makes you wonder where the lie becomes problematic. The experience of Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, as absurd as it is, yields nothing. It starts with nothing and ends with nothing. You could believe in Bigfoot or not and still maybe have enjoyed this program. There's no call to action that requires you to further mistrust those around you. It's not paranoia bait. It's, I don't know, a ploy to sell camping supplies or polarized sunglasses. I don't have any answers as to why this thing exists. I just needed to talk to someone about it. This isn't an ad or anything, or a suggestion that you even watch this. I just think you should be aware that things like this are being made. The haha, this is mostly fake but entertaining veil has been crossed, and we're just airing shit tantamount to the War of the Worlds radio broadcast. With a straight face. There are so many aspects of it that capture my imagination, like, what if this took off in a big way? What if it got super popular and had a lot of people talking about it? What would they do? Would they have made more of it? Would they have come out and said, "Yeah, you got us, it's not real"? What could the end game possibly be for this? Unless it truly is a warning.
That was made to assist you. There's a river of red. It runs through you. You animate the dead. What's dead is new. The shovel in our hands, too lost to save. When it's all you've got, everything's a grave. Everything's a grave.
Vampires use candles as a light source.